Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And indeed, it is a genuine thank you. I want to thank you and your team for the very cooperative work that has gone into not only where we are in holding this very, very important hearing today, but in the work that we have done in preparing this draft legislation that has been publicly now released. It's been a little bit of a long process. I think we would all like to move more quickly, but I think we also want to do good work, and that's what this committee is committed to doing. So the focus today on what more we can be doing to ensure levels of protection for those who are subjected to violence in our Native communities, what more we can be doing for Native women around the country. This is a key priority for us, but how we knit this into the broader VAWA picture proposal is also very important. I think you've outlined, Mr. Chairman, that sometimes these issues of tribal jurisdiction are confusing, they're esoteric, but I want to emphasize that the impacts on the ground in Native communities, particularly in places like very rural Alaska, they are very real, they are very tragic. In 2019, we had the Attorney General come out to a small Native village. He looked around, he talked to the people, he left, and he declared a law enforcement emergency. It was based on the fact that Alaska has the highest per capita crime rate in the country. We face a unique jurisdictional landscape, but jurisdictional complexity should not deny safety or justice, and that's what we've seen happening. In 2013, Congress passed the Violence Against Women Act. In Title IX of VAWA 2013, as it's commonly called, Congress enacted what's been described as a partial elephant fix by recognizing the inherent authority of tribes to prosecute and punish certain domestic violence crimes committed by non-Indians against Indian women. At that time, this act was described as unprecedented. Some members of Congress and the news media pushed a narrative that tribal governments somehow would not be fair, they wouldn't safeguard the rights of non-Indian defendants, something that we all knew was far from the truth. And Mr. Chairman, as you have pointed out, 8 years later, the parade of horrible that so many had predicted did not happen. I'm proud to report, as you have, that, and we're going to hear from our witnesses, despite all the horror stories, non-Indian defendants experience a tribal justice system that treats them fairly and perhaps in some ways with more attention than the state or the federal system. And that's why I believe we have a moral imperative here in Congress that we take action to further restore and improve the implementation of this special tribal criminal law jurisdiction over non-Indians who commit violent crimes in our Native communities. I firmly believe that by empowering tribal courts in this way, we can help combat this major public safety issue that affects Native people and Native children. We know the statistics on this committee, we say them a lot, but they bear repeating. American Indians and Alaska Natives are the victims of rape, sexual assault, and domestic violence in numbers far out of proportion to the level that these crimes are committed outside of Native communities. And most often, these crimes are committed by non-Indian men. In Alaska, the rates of violence experienced by Alaska Natives are horrific. There's no other word than horrific. According to a report prepared by the Indian Law and Order Commission, Alaska Native women are overrepresented by nearly 250% among women domestic violence victims in our country. Most Native communities in rural Alaska have no local law enforcement physically present. 1 out of 3 Native communities, 1 out of 3, has no local law enforcement that is physically there. So think about what that means if you are a victim of violence in your home, if your children have been targeted and there is no presence for law enforcement. And currently, Alaska tribes, many of the tribes don't have the tools that they need to address this violence in our tribal communities. Only one Alaska tribe could potentially implement the special jurisdiction. This is wrong. And we have recognized that, and we have to make it right. And we need to do it in a way that recognizes the unique jurisdictional situation that we have in Alaska. We're a PL 280 state, Alaska is. The Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, ANCSA, is going to be celebrating its 50th anniversary just this next week. But it created a new and different approach to tribal land tenure from the lower 48 reservation system. I know it still comes as a surprise to some, but we've got half the tribes in the entire country, but we only have one Indian reservation in our state. After the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the Venati case, in which the court held that ANCSA lands are not Indian country, it became the state's duty, largely alone, to provide for public safety and justice for Alaska Natives. So we're in a situation that just isn't tenable right now. But I'm happy to report that we have an Alaska solution to this complex jurisdictional situation in our state, and we're calling it the Alaska Public Safety Empowerment Pilot Project. We're rolling it out as a part of the discussion draft text title for folks to see, give us your feedback on it. It builds on previous legislation that you've seen from me. It's the product of years of work with tribal advocates and smart lawyers. We're going to be able to hear from Michelle Demert as part of this panel. She has been a great help. But this pilot project will empower a limited number of Alaska tribes to exercise special criminal jurisdiction over certain crimes that occur in villages in Alaska. These tribes will have to meet certain criteria, including having a tribal justice system that can adequately safeguard the rights of defendants. But I am absolutely confident that Alaska tribes are up to this task. Overall, I think we've got a unique opportunity here, working in a cooperative and a bipartisan way to make a positive difference in the safety of our Native communities for Native women and children across our country. And I hope, Mr. Chairman, that we seize it. So again, I want to thank the witnesses for participating today, especially Michelle Demert of the Alaska Native Women's Resource Center. Mr. Chairman, thank you for helping in such a strong and constructive way to get us here today. Thank you.